I'm Lin-Manuel Miranda, and you're listening to Hard NOC Life.
Well, it's the NOC in full color, you see me? The Hard NOC Life, comics, movies, and TV, yeah.
Welcome to Hard NOC Life. It's Keith Chow.
I'm Brittany Monet.
What's going on, Brittany?
Not much. Just ready to talk about things and yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, we're on the eve of a brand new streaming era. Did you hear? A new platform is launching tomorrow?
Yes, it's the combination of Hulu and Disney Plus, right?
No, it's the combination of Discovery Plus and HBO Max.
Oh, okay.
The streaming service that was poorly named from the jump decided it's just going to call itself Max. Here's my question. You and I are both HBO Max subscribers. Do we have to download a whole new app tomorrow? Is that what's going on? Do we get to keep our app? What's going on?
That I don't know. So it's like, I don't know if we have to re-download stuff. And then the main thing I was watching on there, I already caught up to. So I'm not too like worried about if it takes a minute to get it back or whatever. But yeah, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know if they've emailed out instructions to the people who actually has the accounts.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything. I've been looking, I've been refreshing like, hey, what am I supposed to do tomorrow? Because to your point, like if there are shows I'm in the middle of and if I got to download a new app, is it going to remember where I left off? Do I got to start over again? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Think about that. I don't think so. Do I need to re-up my queue of things that I favorited? You know, I mean, these are all like not important questions, but it goes to show just how shitty this whole process has been from the get-go. Like, you know, HBO Max, of course, remember what kicked this whole controversy off is Discovery and Warner merging. David Zaslav, like basically saying, I want to dump all my shitty reality shows onto your platform. And then in the meantime, I'm also going to kill a bunch of shows and movies behind everyone's back and not release some shit. And it's funny because like on the eve of Max launching and you know the full Discovery-ification of HBO, we also got news about Disney Plus going the HBO Max route and killing a bunch of movies and shows off its services. So like, you know, it's funny that they're doing this in the midst of a writer's strike and on the eve of a potential SAG strike, because the whole point of contention for the strikers is y'all ain't paying us what we're worth. And the reason that they're killing all these shows is the studios are saying, we don't want to pay you what you're worth. So it's kind of fucked up. Is what I'm saying.
They don't want to pay people. And especially when it comes to any like streaming service residuals. Yep. So it's just like, no, you got to pay people what they are worth. There is a reason why that turns into like, okay, this is practically slavery.
Yeah.
So no, you need to pay people properly. And AI is so heartless. Like, don't do AI. I'm sorry. I'm so against it. So actors who are in union, who happen to listen to this podcast, you got to vote yes on a strike because your job is potentially in danger, especially, you know, actors of color. Like, you know, there's already clothing brands or whatever that are like, oh, we're going to be using AI models to increase diversity. When it's like, no, why don't you have to just hire the actual like people of color models that are out there? Like, what?
That's one of the problems with just focusing on representation. It's like, yes, representation is important. It would be nice to see yourself, but not if it means you're not hiring those folks, right? Because like, the limits of representation when it's just on screen and not behind the camera was you may see your faces, but you're not getting your stories. So we needed more writers and more directors and more producers of color. It's the same kind of idea, right? It's like, oh, we'll just like paint someone black and that's good enough. Like, no, that's not, that defeats the whole purpose of what we're talking about.
Exactly. So that is all part of like things that are kind of part of the strikes that are going on.
But it's wild that like in the midst of the writer strike's been going on almost a month now.
Yeah.
And like you said, SAG-AFTRA is about to vote on striking too. So we are looking at a situation in which the writers and the actors are potentially on strike at the same time.
Yes, the two important like groups of people that you need for film and TV to make film and TV work. Like, yes, you do need set designers.
Well, right, but you're designing sets and shit for who's going to be there, who's going to populate those sets.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you need the writers to tell the story on the page, and then you need the actors to tell the story on screen. So it's very just like, you need those two groups of people. You need to pay people what they are worth. And, you know, thing is, most of these studios can't afford to. They just choose not to. And that's the problem.
That's why these like Disney Plus cuts are striking, and no pun intended, because, you know, like, again, part of the negotiation is how do we ensure better pay for the writers on the shows that they produce, particularly for streaming. Streaming is the bone of contention here, because all of the movies and TV deals of the past are kind of like up for grabs in this new era of streaming. And because like a lot of these studios are keeping the content in library, and because it used to be, you know, you sell a show every couple years, you sell it to syndication, and then you sell it to cable, and every time you sell a show or every time a Blu-ray gets made, the actors and the writers get a residual of that. But when all the studios are keeping it in-house and keeping it on a streaming platform, you have to renegotiate what those streaming deals could be, because there's no longer like a proportion of a residual of a sale to like a different license or whatever. But now the studio is saying, well, you know what? Instead of negotiating what these residual deals are, or maybe we will say, hey, you get X percentage of, you know, whatever. But now they're saying, but you know what? We can also like not ever show your show, and then we don't have to pay you anything. And that's what's fucked up, because it's the whole Batgirl situation. Like, you had these people putting their heart and soul into a movie, and the Warner Brothers studio decides, you know what? We'd rather write it off for taxes and not even show it.
Yeah.
It's fucked up. It's really fucked up that, again, they're doing this in the middle of the negotiations. I can't see SAG-AFTRA and WGA like wanting to negotiate if the other side is doing this shit.
Exactly. And I started Willow, and I haven't got around to finishing it because I've watched so many shows.
Well, you got 5 days to finish it.
Yeah, I know. Now it's like, great. I gotta like try to hurry up and finish that. Luckily, I have 2 days off this week. It's my mom's birthday and my birthday this week. But like,
oh, happy birthday!
Thank you.
I mean, I'm glad you brought up Willow, because to me that was the biggest name in the blacklist of shows getting deleted from Disney and Hulu, because Willow was one of the biggest shows that Disney was promoting all of like the last 2 years. You know, it's this legacy show. It's the, you know, return of a classic property from the 80s. They put a whole bunch behind it, and it's only been out for like less than 6 months.
The thing is, a lot of people I know who watched the show and who has finished the show really love it. And I've only watched like one episode of it, and it's good. So I don't get the like, I don't know why they're pulling that show if it's not selling enough merch where they feel like, all right, this show isn't going to work out. Because I don't know exactly how they base views or like, you know, for streaming services.
Well, and that's the other bone of contention, is because it's all of that data is so opaque and not transparent, you know?
Exactly. So it is frustrating that they're pulling shows before some shows really get to like get their heyday, especially with streaming services, when there's this idea that like, oh, the shows will kind of always be there. So, and then now someone had tweeted that, like, at least when it comes to Netflix, because Netflix is, you know, prolific for canceling shows too early. They're like, I don't watch any Netflix original shows now until they at least have 2 seasons and are renewed for a 3rd season. So it's just like, now people are choosing to actively not watch Netflix shows unless they're going to renew them for a certain amount of time. So now it's like, it's causing this really hard like this precedent where some shows are just not going to get watched because of that. And then they're for sure going to get canceled. And then it's just a whole frustrating thing. Is like, why, especially when you own the show, why are you pulling it off of your streaming?
Well, and that's the frustrating part, because like the promise of this whole streaming era is, to your point, the library, right? Like these things will exist forever, and we will be able to access it whenever we want. And that's why it was so weird to hear like, oh, we're actually removing these things from the service. Because I mean, and this is, you know, shout out to me and you, this is why we always advocate for physical media, because the studio can't come into your office and steal your Blu-rays off your shelf, right? Like, buy it on physical media, it'll never go away. that said, the other issue with like, particularly with these shows being deleted off Disney Plus this week, there's no plan to release them on physical media either. So if you are a Willow fan and you didn't get to watch the show yet, or you're planning a rewatch or whatever, after May 26th, you ain't never going to see that shit again. And you can't buy it. You know, maybe Disney will license it out to somebody else. And that might be part of the plan, right? Like they want to make more profit by, instead of just hosting it on their own server. That's kind of what Warner Brothers was doing, right? Like they sold a bunch of their properties to other streaming services. That's why it was like the new Batman animated series is going to be on Amazon instead of HBO Max. And it's like, what the fuck? And that's why they want to reap the profits off that. But again, we're talking about in the context of the writer's strike and the potential SAG strike. Maybe they don't want to license these shows because, again, they don't want to pay the residual. So they're just going to like bury them so they don't have to. And that's that's the answer to your question. Like they own it. So why would they not show it? They don't want to show it because they don't want to pay people.
Yeah. And it's just, it sucks. You got to pay people for their work.
But at least Netflix, they may cancel shows, but they haven't yet started removing stuff off their service, right? Like all the shows that have been canceled are still accessible, aren't they? From
what I know of as of right now, yes. But who knows if that's going to start changing in the future because other places are doing it. But yeah, I don't know. There's so many stuff too on Netflix that I think deserved more seasons and didn't get them. And then other stuff that they keep renewing. I'm like, oh, okay, that can kind of, go away now.
Well, and that, the last time there was a writer's strike is when we basically created reality TV because the assumption was, well, we don't need writers for that.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened with HBO Max, right? Because again, we were just joking about Discovery Plus being the home of like trash reality TV, basically. And maybe that's what they're banking on. Like we can do like 100 episodes of 90 Day Fiance without writers. And so that's what we're going to just flood the zone with maybe and not have to worry about like shows involving, superheroes or lawyers or whatever, I mean, it's a weird time to like launch your brand new streaming platform when like the stigma of streaming is worse than ever.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, leaving certain people, especially people who follow exactly what's going on, it's leaving the, people like not wanting to actively watch stuff because of like, oh, it's going to get taken away.
Yeah. And there's already like the complaint folks have been saying for a while now, like with all of the different streaming services that, we went to streaming from cable because, cable was getting astronomically expensive. So we wanted to cut the cord. But now if you wanted to stream stuff, you have to subscribe to like 7 different services so that you felt like, okay, now I have access to everything. And now these services are starting to like cut shows. And it just feels like,
and cracking down on password sharing.
Yeah, that too, right? People, I don't know. It's tough to like get excited about any of these things. Like there was a new Secret Invasion trailer that dropped. There was news that the Echo show is going to be, instead of doing it week by week, they were going to release all of it at once.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that means. Like, is that like a vote of no confidence in Echo, or is that like, I mean, at least they're still doing the show. I was worried for a minute they were going to like just not do the show.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, if they have no confidence in it, they think no one's going to watch it. But it's like, I don't know. But again, we have to remember not everyone who watches everything on Disney Plus or through the MCU or Star Wars are like super connected to where they know what's going on behind the scenes of stuff.
Yeah.
They don't follow that. There were people who were genuinely surprised about, Toby and Andrew being in No Way Home, where like when it was like, well, everyone knew that. What do you mean you didn't know?
Right. There are normies out there. Nerds.
Yeah. So it's like to remember that there are normal people out there who might not know that, Daredevil is gonna be in Echo, like, but also then again, like the last show that they tried to sell where Daredevil's in it, he didn't show up till towards the end, which kind of pissed off a lot of people too. So that's why I don't know if they're dropping it all at once so that like, people are like, oh, it's great, you see Matt Murdock, and it's not as like, yeah, I don't know if that's what it is. If they're listening to, people who didn't like certain shows for the wrong reasons, for sexism reasons, and not for because like, oh, there was actually something wrong with the show, So it's very, I don't know what's the deal. But I don't know. And then also Loki, I feel like I just rewatched Quantumania last night. So I just, what are they going to do with Loki? Because they're.
Well, I'm pretty sure they're stuck with whatever Jonathan Majors already shot. I mean, they haven't made an announcement on what they're going to do anyway. So they may end up keeping him, or who knows? I mean, the other consequence of the writer's strike might be like the whole multiverse saga is going to get delayed 3 or 4 years because, part of the problem with the way Marvel operates is that everything is like 2-3 years out. So like this is what happened with COVID, right? Any delay in production fucks up like the next 6 movies.
Yep.
So with the writer's strike and a potential actor's strike, they may not even be able to like do what they wanted to do to lead up to Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars, right? So, like that's kind of, again, people always talk about they need a plan, but sometimes plans can paint you into a corner, and it's better to be agile and the old school way of doing sequels, see what works and then work on it rather than like try to shoehorn everything into something that might not work, because now you're stuck.
Exactly.
Before we take a break and go to what's nerd popping, I did want to ask if there's anything you're excited about with this new Max service. Like they're trying to hype it like it's this new thing. Like I've been watching the NBA playoffs, and every 5 minutes it's like another Max commercial, and I'm like, didn't we do this 3 years ago? Like these are just the HBO Max commercials. Now they just added like fucking Chip and Joanna into them. So like, is anyone excited about this whole Max shit? I don't know. I just feel like
I feel like, because I'm not someone who regularly like watches the HGTV type of like stuff. If I happen to watch it, because like my mom has it on.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, look, I used to when we had cable, we used to like keep that shit on Food Network or HGTV just in the background.
Yeah, I don't know, but those shows for me, like as a whole, are not shows that I'm like, let me go and watch this. That's not where my brain goes. Like I might not be picking something quote unquote like in the geek culture to go watch right away, but that's still like, I don't know, those type of reality shows aren't where I go. So I don't really have anything that's like, okay, I'm excited to watch that. I the main thing that I was really watching at HBO Max recently, on which I finished, is Doctor Who. I was trying to catch up before, and that is going to be moving to Disney Plus.
Yeah, so, right. So there's no reason for you to catch up. It's just going to be on the other service, unless they cancel it off there too. Who knows? I mean, that's the thing. There's no guarantee about anything anymore.
The only thing, Doctor is literally the longest running television show. So I think Doctor Who is going to be fine. Yeah,
I'm sure there's some BBC streaming service at the very least that you could find if it does end up getting moved around. So anyone who listens to this podcast knows my bugaboo around the name of the HBO Max streaming service. Even 3 years ago when it launched, I always thought that like calling it HBO Max was a mistake, just because it wasn't just an HBO app, even though HBO was probably the biggest draw, of people who wanted to watch HBO stuff. But it was so much more than that. It was, I mean, that's what the original tagline was, not just HBO. And so like, then why call it HBO Max? So they decided to not do that, and they dropped the HBO from HBO Max. And I've read a lot of people complaining that like, why would you drop the biggest name brand? But I always thought this was the smartest thing to do to begin with. I just think Max is a stupid name for a streaming service. Am I alone here? They're like just calling it Max. First of all, Max used to represent Cinemax. So is this the Cinemax streaming service?
Yeah, I don't know. I thought HBO Max sounded cool. Honestly, I know you were like, it doesn't make sense, but I thought HBO Max sounded cool. Sorry, Warner Plus was not it.
Well, I was more for, if it was anything like Warner Max, I would have. Or my pitch was, call it the WB. Just bring that brand name back.
Actually, the WB was a nice name brand. I don't know why they anyways, I don't know what name would work.
Yeah, I just think Max is stupid. Like, hey, did you see Max last night? No one's going to say that. You know what I'm saying? Like,
or what do you watch on Max? Maybe. Yeah, I don't know.
It's very 90s. To the max, man. They should just call it HBO Extreme.
Hey.
Yeah. All right. So that's it. I'll get off my soapbox about the streaming wars. It's just funny how like the idea of streaming has completely changed in the last 3 years.
Like fundamentally.
Yeah. But Anyway, we'll take a break, and on the other side, we'll see what's nerd popping. So, Brittany,
Yes.
you're a big fan of Paramount Plus, aren't you?
Oh, I am indeed. That is the home of one of my favorite shows, which I know some people I've talked about it.
Yeah.
Before.
You're not the demographic.
I know I'm not the demographic, but the show I'm talking about is obviously Yellowstone. If you don't know, I love Yellowstone, and it's literally one of the most like. I'm saying I know a lot of people like, oh, it seems like it's for like rednecks or something like that. I promise you, the drama is so good. It's just, and if you're a fan of Twilight, there's like an actor from Twilight that's on there.
Well, it's one of the biggest shows in the world.
Yes.
And it's got these like great spinoffs, right? Because isn't 1923 a spinoff of Yellowstone and 1883? Am I getting those years correct?
No, it's 1923. I'm not there yet on the spinoffs.
But it's got like Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren. Like,
yes.
That's crazy that those are like actors you get for TV shows.
Tim McGraw and Faith Hill are on the 18 one, if you are a country fan. Which Tim McGraw is honestly a really great actor. Don't know if you've ever seen Friday Night Lights, but he's a great actor. So they're great. Those are great things to check out. I have to wait for my mom and brother to watch it because we are such a fan of the show. Teen Wolf is also on Paramount Plus, and they released a new movie with Tyler Hoechlin is in it and back. So I'm excited to watch that finally when I get around to it. I know it's been like 2 months now, but it's hard to coordinate our schedules.
Well, the reason we're bringing up Paramount Plus is that if you click on the link in the description to this podcast, you can actually stream Paramount Plus for 1 month for free. We're just excited that we get to share Paramount Plus with all of our listeners. So click on the link that you see in the description and stream Paramount Plus for free for a month. Try it. If you don't like it, you can cancel. But if you love it, if you love Yellowstone, Teen Wolf, Star Trek, all of the Star Treks are on Paramount Plus. Do that and you'll help us out in the process. So Brittany, what you got going on this week?
I started a 90s anime, which a lot of people know, but I don't watch anime much besides Sailor Moon or Avatar: The Last Airbender. So I started Berserk. 1 episode in. It's really cool. I think I'm going to have a lot of fun watching this. So yeah, they're apparently all free on YouTube because that's where I'm watching them right now. So hopefully no one takes it down in the next few hours of me saying this. But
well, I was about to say, we were just talking about streaming. Maybe people bootlegging shit on YouTube we're going to see the return of torrenting shit,
Probably. Wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, it's fun. A coworker recommended it to me, so I'm enjoying it.
Awesome. Well, I think I said this a couple weeks ago, but this week is the final episode of The Flash. It is the death of the Arrowverse. It's finally gone. It is dead. CW recently announced its fall lineup, and there are no superhero shows for the first time in 10 years.
That is crazy.
Yeah, the CW used to be synonymous with the Arrowverse, and there's none. And 2 weeks ago, when I had Flash in my nerd poppin', I had said that the first of the 4-part finale was one of the best Flash episodes I'd ever seen. The last 2 episodes were dog shit. So it reminded me why I stopped watching The Flash 2 years ago. But I can't lie. I'm going to be tuning in live Wednesday night when the finale airs. I've read it's really good, but that's from biased Flash fans, I'm sure. But the thing about The Flash for me, why it's so sentimental that it's going away, is that even though the show launched in 2014, talk about the show was in the air in 2013, and that's when the website launched. And The Flash was one of the first things we talked about on the website, on the Nerds of Color. So it's just wild that after Wednesday, the idea of because back in the day, we used to live tweet it, and we used to have recaps, and it was such a big part of the Nerds of Color identity, particularly because when it launched, it was so big that they'd cast Candace Patton and Carlos Valdez, it was a big deal that they would embrace these nerds of color on the show. And then I admitted I fell off a couple years ago, but I was happy to return. Like I said, I was not thrilled with the last 2 episodes, but I'll be there for the finale. Shout out to The Flash for lasting as long as it did. When did you drop off on The Flash?
It got hard because of just my work schedule and then trying to balance obviously going to work and working out and still like getting time to sleep and seeing friends and stuff. And then it's like I don't podcast about that show directly. So then it
Right.
started like becoming like, okay, at first it was like I would be behind like a few episodes. And then I'd catch up to those chunk and then be behind another set of few episodes. And then it just became like, okay, I haven't even touched the show in like in 3 months. And now, oh, they're on the
It's been 3 years.
yeah. So it just slowly turned into that. So I'm hoping to, when it's all done, I will just watch it on Netflix and
or whatever streaming service it ends up on.
yeah, I think it still goes to Netflix.
Yeah, for now. But I think Netflix had the exclusive for all the CW shows, but I wonder how that's going to.
It's any show that was like, there was a certain year where it was like, if they had already had the deals for Netflix, those shows were still going to be going on even after like those shows end or whatever. But like other shows were going to HBO Max.
Right, because Batwoman's on HBO Max. I think Black Lightning is on HBO Max.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely end of an era. I wanted to ask you, like, you know, your other network, its whole identity was essentially the CW shows. They had to go through like an identity crisis, I'm sure. No pun intended to DC fans.
So yeah, DC TV podcast, which is where I did Black Lightning, and I also did, you know, DC TV Classics with you.
Hey.
And then the Black Lightning podcast turned into the Naomi podcast, and then obviously that show got canceled, and then now that podcast is the Lituation Room. But yeah, it was kind of like I had been wondering what Andy, who is basically the executive producer of DC TV podcast, what he was going to do. And he decided to, because he used to run the Marvel Report as well, which I used to do some writing and stuff for. He decided to fold them in together. And now they're called Multiverse of Color, because a lot of the people that Andy actually works with are people of color. So yeah, there's a lot of different. So like there's me who's a part of it when I can be, because the Lituation Room is now like technically part of Multiverse of Color, which is, they're basically the same two websites folded into one. It's that there's like obviously Nate, if you guys remember him on the podcast, Vanessa does a lot with Multiverse of Color. She writes actually comic book reviews for it. I know she got to do a very fun interview recently for Multiverse of Color, so that should be out soon. Yeah, then like there's other people like I think all the people who did the Green Lantern podcast, they're still part of the Multiverse of Color in some capacity. So it's
no longer just solely focused on DC stuff.
Yes, it's pretty much everything branching into like, you know, Star Wars and blah blah blah. Yeah.
So encroaching on our territory is what you're saying. I see you, Andy. and shout out to Andy, because like, you know, the DC TV podcast family was definitely a welcoming one when we did our show. And like I said earlier, to see the Arrowverse kind of going away and knowing how much that spawned all of these like other like affiliated places, you know, it's a little bittersweet to see it go away. But, you know, shout out to like Candace and Grant and all those guys to finally be able to do something outside of the Flash, because I'm sure after 9 years it's like can we do something else? So and Grant's still out here denying he's in the movie, so take him at his word. I know a lot of people think he's pulling Andrew Garfield, but I have the sense that he's probably telling the truth.
He might be telling the truth just because he's done it for so long that he might just want to do something else.
Yeah, like I don't want to be in it, because it's different. Like Andrew's situation was a little different because it was almost a redemption for him, right? Because he'd been away from it for so long. But like Grant literally just finished it. Why would he?
And I think the difference between also Andrew and Grant is Grant has always been, for the most part, I will say, welcomed with open arms and has been genuinely given.
There are people who prefer him to Ezra still, and I don't blame them.
And like I just think it's because people gave Grant a genuine chance to be this character that people love him. And I feel like with Andrew, there has always been an animosity towards Andrew. I remember when he first got cast, there was just so many people who were like, oh, they just cast the pretty boy of the week. And oh, he's not this, he's too handsome to be a nerd. And it was like from the get-go, there were so many people, especially guys, who were just like, yeah, no, he's not Spider-Man. He's too good looking to be Spider-Man. And it was just like the most ridiculous thing, because it's like, well, if you actually look at how Spider-Man was drawn, he was never drawn to, unfortunately, look like Tobey Maguire.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to mean to Tobey either, but like he was
and then Andrew, you know, he just was his unfortunate thing was that he was in movies that didn't do well at the box office, but
That is
I always thought he was a great Peter Parker.
I think he's great in both roles as like the opposing. I think he was perfect, but a lot of people just didn't like him from the get-go because he's the handsome guy. And that's like, can you really be that guy's nerdy? Like, it doesn't, I don't believe it. And it's just like, what are you talking about? Most guys who are actors are actual nerds. Like,
right. And some of the hottest ones are nerds. I mean, like Henry Cavill, probably the biggest of all nerds.
Exactly. He rebuilds computers and like likes
and
to
plays
paint
Warhammer.
are those the little figurines that he plays?
Yeah. Which he like when they fired him off Superman, he's like, you know what? I'm gonna do a Warhammer movie, so fuck y'all.
Yeah, like he's such a like that's the thing is that some people don't realize a lot of these actors are full on nerds. It just might not look like your stereotype of what a nerd should look like. But yeah, I feel like Andrew has always had that uphill battle, even before the movies didn't quote unquote do well at the box office. That could have contributed to it because people are like, I don't believe that he's nerdy enough to be Spider-Man.
Well, now everyone loves him. Everyone's like excited that he came back. So all that said, Grant ain't in the movie, so stop wish casting it. He ain't gonna be.
Most likely not. But who knows? We'll find out next month.
I guess so. It's hard to believe it's only a couple weeks away. But until then, Britney, how can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, Hive.
Still pushing Hive?
I guess. I use it like once a week, but just in case. Yeah, at Hi Britney Monet. And then you can check out my other podcast, Situation Room, at Lit Podcast. At Lit Room _podcast.
This is my favorite bit of the whole podcast. I can't remember, when you're on Lituation Rooms, do you have a hard time remembering the Nerds of Color, or do you not even like plug our podcast on there?
No, I say the Nerds of Color, and you can check it out at Hard NOC Media.
it goes to show you need a easy to remember Twitter handle. I think is the lesson here. Mm-hmm. My easy to know Twitter handle is the Real Chow, _real_Chow, and Instagram at Real Keith Chow. Follow the Nerds of Color at the Nerds of Color, and go to hardknockmedia.com to find all the podcasts in the Hard Knock family. Give us a rating and a review if you do. Subscribe to the videos at youtube.com/the Nerds of Color. Support us on patreon.com/the Nerds of Color, and go to tpublic.com and search for the Nerds of Color to buy our merch. And until next time,
Andrew Garfield's the best.
Andrew Garfield is the best. See you, everybody.